Welcome to the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle Tremblett, and I'm a firm believer that even when life doesn't go as planned, it is taking you exactly where you're meant to be. On this podcast, I'm here to help you finally release control of what you think you want and begin to just trust in the ebbs and flows of life. Each week, I will show you how to build that positive mindset, radiate with self-confidence, and cultivate an unshakable resilience. Let me prove to you that even when life ebbs, you will glow. Hello and welcome to episode 91 of the Ebb and Glow podcast. I'm your host, Jenelle, and I'm so happy to have you here. If you're new here, welcome. This podcast is all about talking to everyday people about the ups and downs in life. And if you're not new here, you already know that. But if you haven't already, please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. And let me know you're listening. Let me know your favorite episodes. Share the episodes with friends if you've gained value from them. I'm sure someone else will too. So today's episode is with Dr. Laurie Betito, who is actually one of my best girlfriend's moms. And it was such a pleasure to talk to Laurie because Laurie has an exceptional career that she has built in both radio and in the sexual health industry. So Laurie has been in the field of sexuality for over 30 years. She is a clinical psychologist, author, radio and television host, podcaster, 2 times TEDx speaker, president of Sexual Health Network of Quebec, and director of PornHub Sexual Wellness Center. Yeah, that's a resume if I've ever heard one. In this conversation, Laurie and I chat about what it's like working with PornHub and why talking about sex is still so taboo. We talk about what she went through when she lost her radio show and how she pivoted to still be able to talk to the wide audience that she grew over the past 20 years. We talk about taking career risk. We talk about the importance of talking about sex. We talk about the pros and cons of working in the public eye. And we also, towards the end, start talking about seeing opportunities in your career and not letting fear or anxiety stop you from going for something. So as you can see, this episode is going to be full of interesting topics, and Laurie doesn't hold back when she shares all of her knowledge and experiences. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Laurie and reach out to me and let me know you're listening. Laurie, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Jenelle.
I love technically this is the first time we've ever met, which is insane to me.
Yes, because I've heard so much about you and you.
I know.
Yeah.
I said to Liz the other day, I was like, I haven't actually met your mom. And she was like, wait, what? Didn't you come for dinner with us like when she was here last? I was like, no, I think I was out of town. I think I was traveling that month. And she was like, wait, this is insane to me. I was like, I know, like, this is crazy.
Well, I'm happy to meet you finally.
I know. When Liz met my mom when she was here, I think Liz felt very similar, like dynamics and like personalities.
Oh, yeah? Well, the two of you are very similar. So I'm looking at you and I'm like, wow, you even look like my daughter.
I know when my mom met Liz, like she just like spoke so highly of her afterwards. She was like, Jenelle, like Liz is such a nice girl, like just like so smart, so beautiful, like so successful. I'm like, I know. Like I'm aware.
And so you wanted to meet the mother behind that success.
I did.
I love it.
I remember Liz one time, she just came, or I was over to her house and I was helping her like declutter and everything. And she like hands me those like iPhone like pop sockets, and it was like PornHub. And she was like, do you want some like PornHub pop sockets? I was like, kinda actually. It's like, that's really cool. I was like, why do you have that? She was like, do you not know what my mom does for work? I was like, I don't. And she told me, and I was like, this is so cool. And I always asked Liz, because like I find I'm like, how was that for her, like growing up? That just must be so cool to like grow up in a household that nothing about sex is taboo at all.
Right. And if you ask her, because we had this conversation a little while ago, somebody asked her, hey, when did you first learn about sex? And she thought about it and she said, you know what? I've always known. I never had to learn it because I've always known it. Right. It's like if it's part of the family conversation is as nonchalant as possible way, you grow up with it. So there's no one talk. It's not like my mom sat me down or my dad sat me down and said, this is how, this is the birds and the bees. And so my kids grew up like the show Sex Education. Basically, those were my kids, like they were the ones going to school and their friends were asking them, ask your mother this and ask your mother that. And they were giving out the information. They didn't charge for it, of course, but that's the way it was.
My parents have still yet to this day had any conversation about sex with me.
Oh, wow.
I wonder if they know I'm having it.
That's hysterical.
Never. I remember growing up, all of a sudden, my mom put me on birth control for acne.
All
I
right,
got my
right.
first boyfriend. I think that was her version of it, was like, okay, let's go get birth control for acne. And I don't even remember if she like had a conversation with my dad or anything about it, but all of a sudden I was on birth control and like I had a boyfriend at like 16. So she knew what was going on,
Right, right.
but she like didn't have like the words to be able to have those conversations with someone. Isn't
Yeah.
that funny? Why do you think it's still so taboo? Like, it's not even like, let's let the conversation between parent and child go. It's even taboo to talk about with your friends, like
Well,
in your
it should be.
30s.
This is what my entire career has been based on this, right? Why did I get into the media? Why did I mean, aside for the fact that really I got there accidentally and it just grew from there, but it became my mission for some reason to bring sexuality to the evidence-based sciencey part of it too, right? It wasn't just like all of that information to the masses who didn't have access to it. So I started pre-internet, like let's just be real here. This is pre-internet, right? So it became easier and easier with the internet, of course, that people had access to information. But where was this information coming from? So many people have so much misinformation when it comes to sexuality. And for me, the way I talk about sexuality is the way I would talk about, I don't know, car mechanics. Like it's just part of life. And I think when you can bring that to an audience, that it's just less uncomfortable for them, right? Like you want to reduce the discomfort so people can talk about it. And 22 years of doing a nightly radio show brought an audience that would have conversations, like water cooler conversations around my show. So, and I knew this was happening because the feedback was there. Like people would email me all the time to let me know. And so it would open up conversations, and I would talk about things that people would never dream about, like never mind talking about, even doing, right? So nothing was taboo. Everything was discussed, and a lot of things that people would never do, which is fine. But I wanted to bring this non-judgmental approach to sexuality, as long as obviously it was safe and sane and legal and all of that stuff. So that's how I feel I started to like break down some these taboos. Now I'm just one little person here, doing my part, but to me it was really important. And one of the things, why did I start working with PornHub, like as their official doctor? Basically, I started a site with them called the PornHub Sexual Wellness Center, because I found that people were going to pornography to get sex education. So that's the worst place to go. That's like learning how to drive by watching The Fast and the Furious. Like you're going to kill yourself. This is not the way to do it. So I partnered up with them, much to, I had to really think about it to be associated with a porn company and all that. And believe me, we could talk about the flack I eventually got for it. But I took a risk. It was definitely a risk for me, a career risk. But what motivated me was the sheer volume of people I could reach. And I said, you know what? Like in my radio show, I'm reaching, I don't know, 50,000 people a night. With this, I'm reaching 4 million people a month. Like, I think, for me, it was like, wait a second, if I can give these people who are going to porn for education, give them another side to it where they can actually get their questions answered, look at science, evidence-based information about sexuality, talk about the very basics of sexuality, because let's be honest, people who get on those sites are from all over the world. Some of those places have zero sex education. That's what motivated me more than anything, was to bring that information to a larger population.
Was it your idea to start that website or theirs and they approached you?
So what's interesting, it was like a kind of like a fix up. So I have my agent, for example, used to work for their parent company, and she knew that they were looking to start a project. So people don't necessarily know this, but PornHub does get involved in community-based projects. Like they do things for breast cancer awareness. They have all kinds of stuff that they actually do that make no money, that is really just community based. And they were looking for a project, and she knew I was looking I'm always looking for kind of new ways to spread the gospel, so to speak. And she put us together, and together we came up with this site. And so I became the director of this site, like hiring writers, it's not writers. I hire professionals in the field to write about sexuality. So it was very important to me that it stayed evidence-based and science-based and all of that stuff. And it's been a beautiful partnership, and they've been great to work with. And they give us all the freedom to, talk about even the downside to porn. Like, it's not, we wanted to make it so that you get a global idea of all the different areas of sexuality. Yes, it's been great.
But you mentioned that by being associated with PornHub right from the beginning, you lost out on a lot of opportunities. Looking back, was it still worth it? And
let's be clear. I didn't lose out on any opportunities per se, because when I got involved with them, I had already been on the air, let's say a good 15 years. My show was, well established, number one show in its time slot, huge following, listenership, and whatever. And I spoke to them, to the company, the parent company of my radio station, and I said, here's what I want to do. Now they came back to me saying, look, let's not promote it here, whatever. Let's keep the two things separate. But if the higher ups have a problem with it, you may have to, I don't know, they may ask you to stop this or that. I'm not sure what would happen. I said, you know what, let me take it. Let me go for it, right? Let me just take the risk. I took the risk because of the sheer volume of people. So, and I did, and it went fine. It actually went perfectly fine until I lost my show a year and a bit ago, not this last February, the February before, where they did a whole change. And it wasn't because of the ratings or anything like that. They were fixing up the schedule across the board, and they were doing some restructuring. And I said, okay, fine, whatever. And then they wanted me to come back with a podcast on the radio station. However, not the ownership, but the higher ups changed hands. So you never know who's going to be comfortable with sex and who's not. And it just so happened that this one said, we don't like her association with PornHub. So you know what? We're going to put that on hold. I said, okay, fine, whatever. I said, I'm not giving up the reach for that 1 hour podcast on your radio station at this point. And that was the end of that. And then I said, I'll just do my own podcast. And that's what we've been doing. And, my podcast is on all the platforms, but PornHub also hosts it. So it's also there. So again, the reach was important. And it isn't notoriety. It's the reach of information. I really don't care so much. I don't care if you know my name or don't know my name. That's irrelevant to me. But I wanted the information to be out there.
What I hear from you is you cared more about like the greater good and the greater masses than you ever cared what was going to happen with your career. Like, you knew there was a message and conversations to be had, and you're like, I'm willing to take the risk and put my name on the line to do this.
I did, because I believed in what I was doing. So it's not like I could defend what I was doing. If I couldn't defend it, because it wasn't about the money, and it's not that I don't get paid, but believe me, I don't get paid the huge bucks, but it's not because of that. I knew I had to defend my position and why I chose this association and why I chose to do this. Now, when a lot of shit went down in the last few years with PornHub, as people know, and of course that, that's when the hammer came down on my head again. Like, I got a little nervous at that point, saying, I don't want to be necessarily associated with this. So I made sure, like, I did my due diligence by speaking out with the people there to make sure they were taking the measures necessary to reduce whatever issues people were having and they did. I felt good in that they took care of what they were supposed to take care of. And it's all over you could find it in their media where they put in measures. And I was comfortable with that. I was comfortable with the fact that they did that. And frankly, they've been a really nice company to work for. So giving me a lot of freedom to do the important work. And they believe in this important work as well, which I always felt like I had their back for that. So
it's funny that the higher ups that took over the radio knew what your show was about. And they were like, but I don't want her associated with a porn website. It's like, what do they think you're talking about? Like on the show, there's no difference.
I guess, it was simply because of what went down. I think it was because they don't, the hype in the media, much driven by the anti-porn people, right? It's like you have the most vocal in the smallest group. So do we forget that there are billions of people that actually watch and that it's not harmful to? Like, I'm not denying the fact that there's bad stuff out there. Believe me, there's plenty of bad shit out there. So I never wanted to be in a position where I was defending the industry. I have nothing to do with the industry. I have zero to do with it. I run a wellness education site, pure and simple. So I'm comfortable with that. I don't speak for them. Again, I'm not defending anybody and I don't speak for them. So for me, it was like that minority of loud speakers took over the media storm in that respect. And so understandably, like, the more conservative outlets got a little nervous, and I totally got it. I hold no bad feelings for anybody's business decisions, but I'm comfortable with mine. And I think that was the key here, that I'm comfortable with my decision.
Why do you think some people are so anti-porn? Like, what's their stance?
Well, porn is just what's their stance. Again, I don't dare speak for any side, but there's, how porn is ruining this and ruining that, and it's the cause of addiction. And there's a lot of misinformation too. So of course there's porn addiction. Of course there's bad stuff out there. Of course you have youth that are spending a lot of time on porn and not getting a good vision of what sexuality is and learning all kinds of stuff. And it is definitely affecting young people. But the solution is not to remove porn. The solution is to make people porn literate and to give them the information. So, you go to some states where they refuse to give you education and it's only abstinence education. You think those people aren't going to porn? Of course they are. So you're not backing it up. Like, you're not giving them the other side. So you want them not to go there, but yet you refuse to give them the information that they're curious about. Young people are curious about sex, period. So give them the information and you control the flow of information, right? You want to give them, like, if you can give them comprehensive education and not just abstinence only education, which doesn't work according to the science. So you give them science-based program. We know that works. Porn literacy programs, we know that works. Get kids to think critically about what they're watching. Hey, what you're seeing on there, it's not real. Real women don't act like that. Real men don't have 10-inch dicks, and real women don't scream in ecstasy all the time. Like, this is not real. But unless you talk about it, which comes back to our conversation, talking about sex, unless you talk about it, how are you going to do this?
It's funny. I always laugh at like the abstinence curriculum. It's like, you don't want someone to do something, so you're going to stop them and prevent them. That's basic psychology. They're going to want it more.
That's human nature.
Yeah. It's so funny. And it's like, it's such old school control tactics. And it's like,
yeah. Well, Jenelle, all you have to do is look at the statistics. So in states where they have abstinence only education, that's where you have the most rates of teenage pregnancies.
Exactly.
In those same states, you have the highest rates of sexually transmitted infections. So we know it doesn't work. Like, let's be real. We know it doesn't work.
I want to talk about your experience working in the public eye, the pros and the cons.
Well, kind of fun. I'm not going to lie. It's fun. I feel like I'm let's say for me, I'm a big fish in a small pond, not a small fish in a big pond. So because I'm Montreal centric, and my show was on Montreal airwaves, and at a time it was also in Toronto airwaves and Ottawa and the border states as well and what have you. So I'm really not, it's a small pond, right? But it's fun. And my kids will tell you this, like they always say, every time we would go to a restaurant, my voice would be recognized. Remember, it's radio. So it's like people recognize you for your voice. And many times that's like people, hey, are you Dr. Laurie? And, I'm sitting in a booth with my kids and they're like, this happens a lot, which, I always love the people who give me the feedback, who say, I listen to you every night. I really enjoy it. You taught me a lot, or you helped me through this, or you helped me through that. So that part is really fun. I never went into this business to be famous. Like, I don't even know what that is, or it was just never in my wheelhouse. Like that was never one of my goals in life. Neither was radio, by the way, or television or the media, just so you
It
know.
always falls in your lap.
Yeah, it did not start off as that. My goal in life as a young person was to work in the helping profession in one way or the other. My interest in sexuality started young, like probably high school years. I don't know why it was. I have a big mouth, and I think it just, that's what helped me, is like I would talk about these things. I was a rebel in the sense that I pushed the envelope a lot. And my parents can tell you this from when I was 2 years old. I was constantly pushing the envelope. So if there was something taboo about it, I was going to address it. You know, if I felt that somebody was racist, I was going to push back and put it in their face, you know? So that was me. That was my personality. So when I was a teenager, my friends would always ask me questions. You know, they would say, "Oh, Laurie, how do I give a guy a blowjob? Like, how do I do this? And how do I do that?" And like, I didn't even know half these answers, but I was willing to go get the information, you know, and like, usually from Cosmo magazine at the time. That was,
I read a lot of Cosmo growing up. I had every issue.
Right. So you know that every issue had something to do with sex, right?
That's how I learned how to kiss a guy, how to give a blowjob from Cosmo.
Okay, there you go. So that was what I was basing it on at the time, because there was nothing else. Dr. Ruth became somebody then. So she was big, and I was a big fan of hers. And I said, you know what? I want to do that. Like, I could do that. I want to do that. So that's how my interest in that area became. But I did follow directly through my schooling. I did follow my goal of being in the helping profession. Started off as a social worker, and then started in psychology, then social work, then worked for a bit, went back to school and did a doctorate in psychology. So, and in between did like 2-year training program in sex and marital therapy. So lots and lots of university years, like 15 years of my life were spent studying, which is fine, all worth it. Loved every minute of it. Yeah. And then radio just kind of literally fell into my lap. I worked for a clinic, like a sexual dysfunction clinic. And we had this radio host that wanted to do like a once a week show. They already had a relationship show, but they wanted to stretch the boundaries and go to sexuality. So he naturally came to our clinic and said, "Hey, anybody here interested in, being on the radio?" And back then there was no dump button. So you couldn't get somebody off the air. Like if they called dump, no, like it was live radio, whatever. So it was very challenging in a very different way.
And especially if you have like trolls coming in too.
Oh yeah. And we had them because we were on a music station at that time. Mm. And that show became like a cult show. Like we had a cult following basically. So I said yes. Me and a couple of other colleagues agreed to kind of rotate and do once a week, 2 hours, answering people's questions. Basically, we were just answering people's questions. And oftentimes they were young people, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds. And I did that show for 9 years, actually, until they gave me my own spot. So all in all, I did radio for 30 years.
Wow.
Basically from the beginning of my career, which is interesting, coincided with that beginning of my career in sexuality. And it never let up from there. So I've been in the public from those days, right? So early in my career, like let's say 26, 27 years old, straight through to today, I'm 58. And that's what I've been doing. And then from that, I got all kinds of other stuff. Like I was called in, I was a sex expert on multiple TV shows, for example. And then I was given my own TV show. Like all these people approached me. So they were all like, "Oh yeah, we want to do a screen test with you." So, okay, let's do a screen test, and then whatever, they offered me a TV show. And then from that, I did print, a lot of print stuff when print was big, and had features in magazines and stuff. And so that's how I became public rather than just being in my office, which I'm perfectly comfortable doing as well. I don't need to be public. Right now, I'm kind of in my quiet zone. I'm not so public anymore, except for the podcast, and it's fine. It's been a great ride. I have to say, I have loved my profession, my job. It has not felt like work all these years. It has been a joy. That doesn't mean there aren't downfalls, because you asked me about the downside.
Yeah, I want to know some stressful times of being in the public eye.
So some of the stressful times are more about stalkers. So one stalker ended up in prison. And the crazy thing is when you're a radio personality, you're expected to do media events outside of the radio, right? So we had a lot of, like, I had to host a lot of different events and show up at events and do all kinds of stuff. So, I remember this one guy, he would send like awful emails and then would show up at places, and then at some point he started harassing other people. Anyway, we finally had him thrown in jail. And I have one stalker. He's been stalking me for 10 years. Every once in a while, he just sends me the most horrendous emails calling me the spawn of Satan, basically. And he's in the States. I don't even know how he got to me, but whatever. And I'm not worried that he's going to do anything, simply because, I sleuthed him and found out exactly who he was and found out where he was and all of that. And he has mental health issues. So whatever, he's over there and I'm over here. I feel safer. But, aside from those few things, I would have expected more. I got less than I expected. So I always
more stalkers or just more stress?
Yeah, more crazy people, like more,
really
more because, and maybe it's because it's Montreal and we're much more liberal as a city and what have you, that it passes better. I don't know. Maybe if I was in Texas doing the same thing, maybe it would be different. I'm not sure. But, a few people maybe see me as the spawn of Satan, and most other people see me for who I am. Like, what you see is what you get. This is me, and I'm like this on the air. I'm like this in real life. This is me. So if you're not happy, turn off your freaking radio. This is what I would tell people, and sometimes they would call me and say, I can't believe you're talking about anal sex. You're a degenerate. And I'm like, turn off your radio. Nobody's asking you to listen. Like, for God's sakes,
I see that all the time though. Like even things like on Instagram, it's like, oh my God, I hate everything she's posting. I'm like, well, unfollow. Very simple. Like, no one's forcing you to consume this content right now.
Exactly. And when it comes to the radio, you have an off button. I'm sorry, but you have an off button. And if you hate me so much, why are you listening? It's like, you're allowed to hate me. That's okay. Go ahead.
People want to live in an echo chamber though. So if someone's disagreeing with what their reality is, most people can't handle that.
I guess. But to me, it's a lot of ignorance.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, you don't want to hear it because it makes you uncomfortable. But what I'm saying here is not based on, I'm not promoting. I think that the difficulty was that people thought that if I was talking about a subject, I was somehow promoting it. And this is the same issue we have with sex education in schools.
Exactly.
Right. So that's what became very, very clear to me. So if I'm talking about, I don't know, BDSM, I'm not a practitioner, but I can talk about it and I can tell you about people and I can interview people and I can be interested in their experiences, all, within legal, sane, consensual, all of that stuff. I'm curious, like curious minds want to know, curiosity is a good thing, not a bad thing. So, when, I don't know, this is where kind of get stuck with people who say, well, you're promoting this or you're promoting that. No, I'm exposing you to it though. I am exposing you to it. You don't want to hear it. It's okay. I can respect that. And if it goes against your values, if it goes against your religion, that's okay too. You can turn me off too. Perfectly fine.
People are so funny. And I feel like it's not even an age thing. Like it's ignorance for sure. And yeah, if they don't want to hear it, then they get upset about it. And it's like, you're acting like a child.
Yeah. And it's, I guess it's the closed-mindedness, right? It's not always ignorance, but it's more about openness. And this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning about the taboo-ness of it, right? So when something is super taboo, when other people hear it, it makes them very uncomfortable. So it makes them uncomfortable to hear that level of talk or openness, spoken in that way. Let's say you've never uttered the word vulva or penis or masturbation. And so these words become so heavy with judgment and shame and all of this stuff. That's what I want to take away. Like, what's wrong with the word masturbation, for God's sakes? What's wrong with vulva and clitoris and penis? And like, I wanted people to hear these words, not in a dirty way, not in a, I use proper terminology always on the show so that like people get familiar with these and get used to hearing it so that they're not like turning red every time they hear the word penis.
What topics right now do you find people are having or feeling the most like shame and tabooness around?
I think so much less is taboo, and simply because if you're into something, you're going to find a community of like-minded people on the internet. When pre-internet, it was very different. Post, like now with the internet, the age of the internet, if a guy is into wearing nylon stockings, for example, gets turned on by it, now he just goes online and looks for other men who do the same. And he realizes, oh, I'm not alone. Okay, there's a whole bunch of it. Oh, now I understand. And then there's forums about it. And then there's, all kinds of stuff. So people feel much less alone and much less crazy, let's say, or weird, or whatever terminology you want to use. But they feel like they have a community. And that makes a huge difference in terms of the pain it can cause you when your sexual interests fit outside of the norm. Right? So when your sexual interests are not within that vanilla norm, it can be scary because like, why am I interested in shoes? Why do toes fascinate me? Why do I like this? I don't even know, And so I think this has helped a lot. So as a therapist, I see much less fetishists in my practice because that taboo or that shame around that has kind of gone away. But, like over the years, I have noticed, like I do see much more people who suffer from performance anxiety, lots of questions around, am I good enough? And some of it is attributed to porn and learning sex through porn. Some of it is just the whole dating landscape and expectations, and
especially when it comes to looks too. Like if you're dating someone and they seem to be like following all these like Instagram accounts of like naked women, you feel like you need to look like that, and that person doesn't love you enough because you don't. And it gets in your head, and of course you're going to have performance anxiety.
So how different is that than porn, right? It has the same, and people don't realize that Instagram Agreed. Probably has a bigger influence on expectations than pornography does. Why? Because most people know pornography is fantasy. Most people, right?
Yeah.
Most adult people anyway know that this is like, I'm not doing this in real life. Like, most women are not like that. Never met women like that. That isn't going to happen. So I think the majority, but Instagram is something different. It's so pervasive in all of our lives. And here's, we're seeing, yes, I can totally see how that's creating insecurities in women, insecurities in men. And yes, by trolling your partner's Instagram, you're like, they're looking at this, that, and the other. And is that what they're really interested in? Is that, so yes.
I would even have an insecurity of like dating someone. They say this celebrity was hot. And I'm like, well, that celebrity doesn't look anything like me. So are you actually into me? And then I would get in my head all about that. And then the sexual intimacy would go away. Like there is a spiral there.
Yes, but it's mistaken, right? Because it's like if I love, I don't know, Jason Momoa, who I happen to love, right? I think he's hot as hell. But my husband doesn't look anything like that. Like, Who cares? I love my husband. Like, I'm not going anywhere else. Like, he's my fantasy guy, He's my hall pass. Yeah, right. Yeah. Like, I guess it's not going to happen, but that's all it is. That's my fantasy guy. I'm an old lady. Like, I'm going to still look at younger guys that are hot. It's okay. I mean, there's legal age, of course. So, that doesn't mean that what I have at home, I don't want, because my attraction to my partner goes far beyond just the physical appearance, far beyond. So, and when he looks at me, I don't have the hot body. I'm 58, like everything's sagging a little bit, right? It's not like I'm nowhere near, whatever, but he doesn't care because he loves me. So like the hotness comes from so much more than just the objective view of what you look like. So people have to be, they have to caution that. Like, it's not about, you can find somebody hot and still be madly in love with your partner, full of desire for your own partner and what have you. It's not just because you look at something else doesn't mean that you don't turn them on. So your partner, you might be small breasted, but your partner might be looking at big breasted porn. They're not going to give you up to go for a woman with big breasts who cares? Like, what's in her head? What else is there about her? But fantasy wise, it's okay.
I love that you brought up your husband, because something I want to ask you is, being a sex therapist and also like a licensed psychologist and psychotherapist, do you feel the pressure to have a perfect marriage and a perfect sex life?
That's a great question. Haven't you ever heard the expression of the shoemaker has no shoes?
Yeah.
I guess like it's not true, but you try to practice what you preach. But I'm not in psychology or sex therapist mode in my own marriage. Like, that's ridiculous, right? We have problems like anybody else has problems. We have fights like anybody else has fights, but maybe we have better communication because of my profession and what have you. But, people might be surprised to hear we're pretty vanilla. Like, we're not like, and people always joke about him. Oh, your wife's a sex therapist, and he's like, yeah, lucky me, It's like, so
he's like, there's no benefits.
Yeah, that's right. Where's the benefit? Except for the jokes that come from that. But we have kind of a regular, listen, we've been together almost 30 years. We have a lovely marriage, ups and downs like everybody else, but you get through it, and we change. We understand that we need to communicate about it. And so we kind of know what we need to make it work, and we make it work. Like we stick to it and make it work. So I think at the beginning, when we started dating, I was a sex therapist then, right? So my dating life was interesting back then because I was single and a sex therapist. And I refused to tell people what I did for a living because then, and this is before radio stuff. And I was like, I remember like, if I said it, then these guys would have these expectations, and then they would like, almost like want to be like, they would probably
fetishize you.
Yeah. But they wanted a report card.
No.
Like it happened once where, it was like a guy was like, so how did I do? I said, do you want a report card? I'm like, I'm done with you. Thank you. But that's gone, So then I started not saying it at all. I just never told anybody what I did, And
I'm sure that guy wanted to leave that and be like, well, a sex therapist said I was great.
Right. Or, love it that so many people after I became, let's say popular on the air or whatever, people would say, oh, I dated her. No, you didn't. You were fixed up with me. We had a 20-minute date, didn't like you, never went further. You did not date me. It's like people are like, it's like, oh yeah, I was friends with her. No, you weren't. You hated me in high school. Now you suddenly love me and you were my friend. You were not my friend. So those are kind of some of you could see that come out, after you get some level of notoriety. Now everybody wants to be associated with you, or the people that hated you suddenly think, want to believe that you were friends with them. And it's like, it's such BS. Honestly, and I have no tolerance for fake. And I see through it and I'm like, oh God, roll my eyes.
I resonate with that. My personality is very similar, and some people really don't like it.
I don't give a shit.
I know, me either.
You and me, I really don't care. Like maybe I cared more when I was younger, and obviously didn't care that much because I do what I do anyway, and even get with the criticism. I think I've always had a bit of a thick skin. I've had to develop a thicker skin, obviously, because when you do what I do, you have people who hate you or people who love you.
There's no in between.
Not really. So they either love you or they hate you. And so I have to accept that I have haters, and you know what? It's okay. You don't have to love me. I don't love everybody. It's fine. I can handle you not liking me, but maybe you want to think about why you hate me, like think about it, and it's okay. Cause I'm a pretty decent human being. So I don't go around hurting people. So, it's okay though. You don't have to agree with me, and you don't have to like what I do. And I can respect that,
I always say, if you don't have any haters, you're probably not doing anything right. Like you're probably, no one's really probably paying attention to you if you don't have haters.
Right.
I would love to have hate. Like I want haters because people are paying attention. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It does something. I'm not going to say it doesn't do anything to me, because the occasional hate email, like
or a bad review will kill you.
Bad review, whatever. It's a stab in the, like it gives me a little stab, I get over it quickly, but I'm not going to say it doesn't do anything.
You're still human.
I'm still human, exactly. And I can, my feelings can be hurt, of course, but how much stock do I put in it? How much do I give it my energy? I don't. That's my choice. Like, I'm not going to lose sleep over it because you hate me. Like, I'm okay with me. I know what I'm doing. I'm fully capable of taking responsibility. If I screw up, I'll take responsibility. I can screw up too. I've screwed up on the air before. I've maybe, treated somebody maybe not so nice. I'll take responsibility for it, and that's okay.
Okay, last topic before I let you go. I just want to ask you a couple quick questions around your attitude about life. Like, you have the type of attitude that, like you said, you don't get shaken up very easily. And you said that you look at life as when one door closes, it's actually an opportunity for a better door to open. So many people don't think that way.
Right. And I do look at life like that. Like, when I lost my radio show after 22 years, I'm not going to say it didn't hurt. It hurt because I was going to miss my audience, right? Like, and they were missing me. Like, it was, I felt bad for them because they were listening every single night. Like, I became part of their family, right? And so they were suddenly losing it, because in radio, you lose your show from one day to the next. They don't give you a chance to say goodbye. So that pinched for a good couple of days. And then I said, okay, well, that wasn't, it's not in my control. So let me find another door. And then boom, thought, okay, podcast. Yeah, everybody's doing it. I'm going to do it too. And then I just started getting involved in that, and that took off. And so for me, I've always looked at my career has always been about opportunities that show up, but they only show up if you let them, if your eyes are open to opportunities. So if you're not open, if you're full of fear and anxiety about life and things that you can do and all these opportunities, you don't see the opportunities. So if you keep an open mind, you will see them. There are opportunities everywhere. It's about you using those opportunities and making something out of them. So I never let myself be driven by or stopped by fear. So for me, it was the opposite. If I'm afraid of something, that's a signal to my brain that says you should go for it. You should go for it. It's going to be tough. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be anxiety provoking until it's not. Like any fear, right? So when I started radio, I was like, I can't do this. How am I going to do this? What if everybody hates me? What if I sound like, I always thought I sounded like Mickey Mouse. Like, I can't be a radio person. I'm not made for this. And all of these thoughts. And then I was like, wait a second, stop. What's the worst that could happen? So I'll go on the air. I'll make a complete fool of myself. People will forget about it eventually, and it will be the end of that. I just won't go back on. Like, if it's really bad and I get tongue tied and there's all kinds of dead air and I can't do it, okay, I won't do it. Like, I'll just tank and that's it, but that didn't happen. So eventually, it used to be where at the beginning I would like prep for hours to do this 1 hour show. And then at the 22-year mark, I prepped for 3 minutes. Like, it wasn't, there was no prepping involved. Like, it was just like, what do we want to talk about today? Okay, let's talk about this, and there was very, very little prepping involved. So it wasn't like it was at the beginning. So everything is fearful at first. And then once you get friendly with it and you get used to something, the fear goes away. So, and that was the same for every single thing I ever did. TV is nerve wracking, and it's all nerve wracking, but anything new is nerve wracking. So confront it head on. And that's just been me. I'll suffer the discomfort of confronting the fear, and I'll do it. And this was my philosophy since I was young. Like, I can tell you a story that goes back when I was 16 or 17, just going into CJEP, which is our college years, right after high school. And for some reason, I had this fear. It was really a phobia, let's just say, of handicapped people. Don't ask me why. I was traumatized when I was a young kid by something had happened. I don't remember, but it was stupid. And I know it was stupid. Intellectuals, what are you talking about? This is like, this is normal people. Like, why am I afraid? And then I said, I cannot live like that. I refuse to be afraid of somebody in a wheelchair or somebody and so I decided at that age that I was going to volunteer for the Shriners Hospital at the time it's called Shriners Hospital for Crippled Children. So you're talking about the most handicapped children coming from all over the world to get operations. And I volunteered there and got over my fear within 2 days. It was done. And for me, I got to confront this. And I remember sitting there going in for an interview, almost wanting to pass out. And like, it was like a visceral feeling. And I said, no, I am not letting this win over me. This is ridiculous. And then of course, it became very ridiculous. And there you go. So that was my first example where I can think of my personality saying, I will not let fear take over. And especially when intellectually, I knew this was nothing to be afraid of. It was ridiculous.
And you took that into the rest of your life, career-wise, life-wise. Yeah.
Yeah. That was my philosophy. It was something that I tried to teach my own daughters, that if it's scary, do it. Just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? And thankfully they're both pretty strong women, who are also action oriented in that respect. So
probably even more so. Like, I feel like the next generation of it's even more so. Like, wonderful. I know Liz, she doesn't think twice about it. She's like, if she wants to change something, she just does it.
Yeah, she's action oriented also. I'm assuming I had that influence on her. She might not admit it or know it, but
no, definitely.
It was definitely something that she saw me do. Listen, they grew up with me their whole life, being in that public eye and forging ahead and doing all of these things, right? So I guess I was just mom to them. So, but somewhere they saw what I did. And of course, I have to give kudos to their father, my husband, who I couldn't have done all of this without his support, because I was working the crazy hours. So I was the one working at night. I was the one needing to sleep in because I was going to bed so late. He needed to do a lot of the caregiving, like their routine, the morning routine, the night routine. He needed to be available to them. Thank God he did all the cooking, because I hated to cook. And he was the one preparing their lunches. So he made it easy for me to do the job. Not that I was a very present mom in many other ways, but those functional things that needed to be done at night and in the early morning, he was able to take over when I couldn't, right? So there was a nice balance of the two parents kind of doing that. So I wouldn't have been able to do that without that.
Yeah, I feel that. There was a lot of times in my life where my dad was taking care of me while my mom was working a lot. And I feel like that's probably why Liz and I don't really subscribe to traditional relationships and hierarchies. Yeah. Exactly.
Her father was as nurturing as her mother. We both did all of it. So all of it. It wasn't one did more than the other. So
last question. What's next for you? And more so, what opportunity do you want to happen for you next?
I don't know. I think I'm hoping to work on a couple more books. Maybe that's my next project. And, opportunities come up, collaborations come up. I get, people say, hey, I want to collab on this or that. So I wait and see. I have no
plans. Do you have anything you're aspiring for?
No.
Really?
No.
You just wait for it to happen.
I'm happy in my day-to-day. I'm happy with seeing my clients. I'm happy with the balance of I do art when I sculpt and paint, and I have a balanced life with all that I'm happy. I'm okay. If my life stays exactly like it is today, I'm good. But that doesn't mean opportunities won't come up and I will take them, not take them. Probably I will take them. I don't think I've ever really not taken an opportunity, but whatever, if I can fit it into my schedule, I'll do it. So we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I continue to do what is fun for me. So working with my clients is not that it's fun, but it's rewarding and it's my passion. So doing my podcast is fun. Writing is fun. Whatever's fun, I'm just going to keep doing. If it's not fun, I'm going to stop. I'm too old to do things that I don't want to do. So I only do what I want to do right now. That's it.
More people need to take that advice. Laurie, before I let you go, where can everyone find you if they want to connect further? Plug your book as well.
Okay. So if you go to drlaurie.com, drlaurie.com, you'll see there's information about my book. I've done 2 TED Talks on sexuality, female sexuality, sexuality in long-term relationships. My book is the Sex Bible for people over 50. My podcast is Passion with Dr. Laurie. You can find me by that name on Instagram as well. So I'd love, we just created the page. So new followers are, of course, welcome. So it's Passion with Dr. Laurie, DRLEURE. And that's about it. That's where I can be found. People can send in their questions to me. We answer them on the podcast. People can check out the PornHub Sexual Wellness Center as well. Yeah, it's pretty easy to find me, actually.
Public figure, pros.
Yeah. A Google search will,
The SEO is perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely, if anyone listening today is interested in more like sexual education and sex podcasts, Laurie's podcast is phenomenal. I love it. It's really good. So please check that out and connect with Laurie further. Laurie, it's been a pleasure. I feel like we've only hit the tip of the iceberg of so many things we could talk about. So please, you're welcome to come back anytime.
You invite me anytime. I really loved it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Did you know that I'm not only a podcast host, but in my full-time career, I am a Toronto-based real estate agent. In 2021, I closed 100 deals. Yes, you heard that correctly. So if you or someone you know is a busy professional looking to get into the Toronto real estate market, and you're looking to work with a realtor who values your time, most importantly, make sure to reach out to me by going to my website, www.JenelleTremblay.com. You'll see on the top right corner, there's a button that says Let's Talk. Click that button, book a call with me, and I look forward to helping you find your next home.